Bona tarda, buenas tardes, good afternoon, good night for the Irish expats. I'm so excited because I have the privilege sometimes to send a list of people I like, people that I have had the opportunity to find through my travels in different talks and conferences through the world. And I send this list to Marc Panero here on the first line. He's the man behind the strings of all these talks, bringing all these amazing people here. And from time to time, he picks someone from this list. And today is one of these days where we have the amazing presence of Yosuke Ushigome. And Yoshi is an amazing interaction designer. It's weird to call him interaction designer. I think he's much more than this. I was trying to look for a quote or an idea that could somehow connect the way I look at his work. And I found this one, which I think can fit a bit on it. And it says the following: to understand something is to understand its topography, to know how to trace its map, and to know at the end how to get lost in it. That's from Susan Sontag. Rest in peace. And I think Yosuke is an amazing person at designing how to get lost, but also how to get back home, right? He does that in information technology, and he somehow explores which are the effects that all these tools that are kind of emerging and changing our life and changing the way we connect, and we have these weird relationships with our parents, with our friends, with our colleagues at work, is changing, and how we can actually change this technology back, right? How we can shape it in the same way this technology is shaping us. So with no further ado, please have a big applause for Yosuke Ushigome.
All right. Thanks, powerful introduction. I think that was one of my best introductions I've ever got. And just checking the notes display here, because I tend to take notes down when I'm making presentation, and I'm not good at remembering all the things I need to say. So I think it's coming up. I don't know. Does it work? It's working, but this isn't showing the presenter notes. I'm getting really nervous, but we can start. I think we can start. Let's give a go. And I hope it's going to come up very soon. No, it did. Perfect. So I'm Yosuke, and I'm currently working for this company called Normally as a lead interaction designer. Normally is a sort of London-based tech, data, AI studio. I think we all find difficult to explain who we are. But I also teach at several art college and design colleges in London, like Goldsmiths University. So I'm extremely feeling privileged to be here, to be able to talk about what I do, and looking forward to hearing what you make of it. So I gave a title, Making Data Speak Human, and we'll find out what it means. These are some of the things I've made in the last maybe 5, 6 years, in the last 5 or 6 years. And as you can see, medium is quite diverse, from kind of interaction physical prototypes to experimental filmmaking, experimental websites, an app. It's every project is different. I'm really enjoying that part of the work that I do. What they have in common, although, is that they are not for people to buy straight away. They're not the products that you can buy off the shelf. They're prototypes that make alternative futures tangible. They're for people to discuss ideas. They're for people to experience what different future scenarios look like and feel like, and decide what to do today. I sell alternative futures because I think if we leave our futures to people who can afford to, quote unquote, invent it, I think we're going to be living in a future full of things like these. We are often presented with images like this. These are kind of typical future vision-y things, full of curved surfaces, floating displays, flexible displays and screens and stuff like that, gestures, perfect, so perfect, super clean work environment, perhaps full of white people. And in those scenarios, the most outrageous thing is I have a 7-year-old son, but in those scenarios, children are so well-behaving. It is outrageously well-behaving. They draw something in this kind of sleek iPad-y thing and stuff like that. It never happens. We need to understand it's fine for those tech companies to make these kind of visions, but also we need to bear in mind that these visions are to sort of direct our imagination towards a specific type of futures that is enabled by this kind of product. And also, more importantly, those are the futures where those inventors will be benefiting from by materializing. And when it comes to data and AI, it's more sort of this tendency to portray a singular vision is even more prominent. From, I don't know how much this cohort, audience is familiar with AI landscape, but I think everything kind of looks the same. You get the idea. Rabbit R1, this portable AI agent thing, to any OpenAI's large language model and other models, to recently Claude Anthropic released this computer use capability in the model Claude, which is really, in itself, it's really, really interesting. But what I want to say here is that everything points towards this concept of artificial general intelligence, AGI, this all-knowing agent that can do everything and anything for us. But I'm not sure if I want to live in that future. Especially, I don't want to live in this one. This is a screenshot I captured from one of the videos that OpenAI used when they announced their video generation model called Sora. And the video was generated by this Sora model, and then it's supposed to be set in Tokyo. I think the prompt was something along the lines of a sleek, sort of well-dressed woman walking down the street of Tokyo at night, something along those lines. But if you have ever studied Japanese language, you quickly realize that this doesn't look like Tokyo, because if you look at the details, the street signs and shop signs, neon signs and stuff like that, they're all gibberish. I can't read them. That's not Tokyo, right? And it's fine. I mean, large language models and image generation models are famous for hallucinating, making up something that doesn't necessarily exist. It's fine for them to do that. What I'm not fine with is that companies like OpenAI getting away with it, being able to kind of be confident enough to put this kind of image as one of their hero images when they release a product. It's because they're only talking to a specific group of people when they announce those visions. So that reminds me of the sort of, who are they talking to, right? In this case, they're only talking to people in English-speaking countries. So that's kind of why I want to explore alternative future visions. We need to diversify AI visions. And yet this sort of AGI discourse vision is so kind of strong and powerful and attention-grabbing, maybe perhaps divisive, and also hype is just extremely huge. So, and it maybe perhaps financial stake is so high that many people are really, really confused. We can't really engage meaningfully and critically with this topic. As a result, people get confused. Even companies like Strava, I think, Strava is a data/social media platform for people who exercise. They upload data from the activities and they talk about it and stuff like that. I mean, to my view, they're extremely data literate company. They've been doing amazing job at creating this platform. But recently, a colleague of mine sent these screenshots showing their latest feature, beta feature called Athlete Intelligence. They must have been super happy coming up with that name. And this feature basically is a summarization of the activity, what's above, in a written format instead of numbers for what's right there. I'm not going to read that out, but it's completely devoid of any value if you think about this kind of data literate user base that Strava has attracted over the years. It's completely sort of out of the context. Maybe they don't even look at it, they don't have time to read it. It kind of looks like it's speaking human language, but it's completely missing the point. It's not talking to us in a way that's meaningful, relevant, or useful. I think the point of this presentation, I think, is that we need to explore, we need alternative data and AI futures. And to do that, we need to make them speak human. And it's not just, looking like speaking human language. What does that mean? I think I'm still exploring, but I'm going to talk through a couple of projects that I was lucky enough to work on in the past and show different approaches that I took. The company I'm working for at the moment, normally, I only joined last year, so I'm including a couple of projects from the previous work, but I think the general vibe and approach is pretty much the same. The first one is about sort of transforming weather data into a personal fortune-telling. Disclaimer, it's from 2017, so it's 7 years ago. 7 years ago. So don't be maybe too harsh on this one, especially from the sort of technical prowess perspective. But this was a year when there was, instead of AI hype that we are now currently in, there was this hype of voice assistants, digital voice assistants like Amazon Alexa, Google Home, Apple had an equivalent probably, and then they were aggressively marketed so that they can get introduced to our home environment. And soon after that, a couple of months later, we started hearing some interesting, really sort of perhaps a little bit disturbing anecdotes where kids who have spent months with Alexa started behaving a little bit more rude to their parents because presumably the working theory at that time, and I think it's correct, it was that Alexa can perform and fulfill the task that children asked, things like, Alexa, do the silly things, or say some jokes, or play some music on. They can fulfill those tasks without kids being polite, saying thank you or please. So as a result of it, kids starting to learn, maybe these demands can be fulfilled without you being polite. So they started behaving slightly rudely to their parents as well, which is really, really interesting dynamics. And Amazon soon after, understandably, released this polite mode into Amazon Alexa, where Alexa rewards polite words being uttered by children users. But I think that shouldn't be, this is great problem solved moment, because our social dynamics is much more richer than tech companies could possibly expect, and let alone these, digital voice assistants. And it's also not only for kids, these issues. It seems to me, at least, that many adults are having similar issues, or many men, perhaps, are having a similar issue with Alexa. And the problem is, of course, exacerbated by the fact that Amazon Alexa's default voice is set as a female voice in a world where people with female voice disproportionately take on household tasks compared with people who have male voice. I also still feel uncomfortable, when you're invited in a house party and the host, he puts some music on, but it's a bit too loud, and he asks Alexa to turn down the volume. Alexa doesn't listen or respond well because of noise, and then he increasingly becomes louder and louder and more rude to Alexa. I feel extremely uncomfortable about it. We also had things like people get upset and extremely mad at Alexa when in the morning Alexa gives a weather forecast, and then later in the day that turns out to be wrong. And it's like, and then they get mad at Alexa. It sounds really, really, really crazy to me. But there is a sort of the social dynamics and the digital assistants that is extremely, extremely interesting. And despite all these flaws, the voice interface was the sort of pinnacle, one of the ultimate form towards this narrative towards a sort of eventual disappearing of user interface, I think. The narrative was that, from mechanical switches to dials and buttons with signals flying through your room, and then later they are replaced by apps, and on iPhones they are programmable and completely non-physical. And then the ultimate form is the voice. And now there's no even need for a screen. You don't even have to lift a finger to order your pizza. And we have pushed every sort of trace of data away from the surface. And what's going to be left in this theory was either sort of architectural wall or human body. I think it was one of the sort of architects' quote. It sounds like I tried to find whose quote this was, but I couldn't find. Anyway, so someone said, every interface eventually disappears into either architectural wall or inside the body. So, inside here, gesture or voice situation or doing something wearable, that kind of situation. Or another person might say, no UI is the best UI. It's the most intuitive form of UI if there is no UI visible. I'm not sure about it. If these immaterial, non-physical interfaces somehow misses the point of this having, there's a discrepancy between this friction between the social dynamics that we are having, especially at home, and this slick interface. If there's a sort of gap between them, that's probably something that we need to work on. That's the sort of kind of idea that we were discussing at that time. When Swarovski approached to me, they rang me one day and then they said, hey, I didn't apply anything, but I hadn't any talk with them, but hey, you won this award for Swarovski. I thought it was completely scam, but somehow they used to do this program called Designers of the Future Award. It sounds even more like a scam, but they had this collaboration program between Swarovski and designers and technologists. I didn't know them as a sort of design company, but I later found out that they're super, super fascinating companies. And they're a crystal manufacturing company, as you know, maybe for fashion items and interior goods. But yeah, they run this designer collaboration for decades. They sadly stopped doing that after COVID, or perhaps a little bit before COVID. But they developed things like touch-sensitive crystals and do some installations and stuff like that. It's super, super interesting. So I was like, off the back of my head, I was thinking about this history of interface and then voice assistants, and then crystal as a material. And they were like, use our crystal and then do some prototypes. So I was like, great, maybe I can use crystal as a sort of counter to this mainstream narrative of disappearing interface. This is so, chunky and kind of spiritual, cultural connotation looks kind of really fascinating. So that's perfect. So I started building up some presentation for them. So this bit is taken from one of the concept presentation I gave to them. And okay, so think of this analogy. Digital voice assistant on the left, and then fortune teller, crystal gazer on the right. I think, from technologist's point of view, they're extremely similar, but from user experience point of view, they're extremely different. I'm going to explain why. So they both take in data as an input. Environmental data, as in weather, date, location of the conversation. User data, like profile, user inputs, what they talk about, what the customer talks about. Perhaps more also about facial expression and stuff like that, and gesture and behavior, etc., etc. What they do with that data, digital voice assistant makes some sort of prediction, what should come next. It's more true in this era of, in today's, LLM, large language model situation where they predict what should come next based on the input. Fortune teller, on the other hand, also makes some sort of prophecy out of all this information, gesture, stuff like that. They somehow make prophecy. We don't know what's happening in their heads. We don't know what's happening in their heads either. But the way we treat these outputs are extremely different. That's where the sort of UX difference comes in. We take prediction as a sort of purely as productivity enhancing thing. That's probably why people can get mad at Alexa when they get wrong about today's weather. It affects my productivity. I took my umbrella and then that was waste. But if you talk to a fortune teller and then they say, maybe tomorrow you'll meet someone important in your life, and then you maybe do or don't, but you don't go back to the fortune teller and ask for a refund for whatever the result might be. It's your story, whether it's true or not. You consume it as your own story. I found that this juxtaposition extremely fascinating. So, and then talk to the Swarovski people. Maybe this is through this material quality of crystal and crystal gazing and fortune telling. Maybe we can create something interesting together to counteract this mainstream narrative of this voice interface. Maybe we can inject some sort of cultural, spiritual, interesting stuff in the narrative. What do you think? And then Swarovski people were like, what the fuck are you talking about? They were like, where is this shiny LED installation? Please make crystal innovation. And I managed to convince them after a couple of rounds, and then we found a sort of, that's probably when I learned about branding most, and in a hard way. And we found a sort of narrative that we can agree together, we can both agree with, which was, they asked me to collaborate with them. That probably means that they want to they're at least thinking about the smart home theme and looking at Google and Amazon as some sort of potential competitor. If you, do projects like this, maybe you can sit with the likes of, those tech giants as a sort of cultural mediator between tech companies and people, and tech company and home. And then that somehow was aligned with their PR agenda, it seemed like. So I got a green sign for this project at the end, but it was an extremely painful process. And this is the final prototype from this project. It was exhibited at Design Miami in Basel in 2018. It's a working prototype of a piece of furniture, sort of smart furniture, that enshrines the digital voice assistant in the middle on top. It kind of resembles what we can find in many households in Japan, which is a sort of mini shrine or mini god shelf, that kind of stuff. It's Shinto altar, where you go in every morning and talk to your ancestor and stuff like that, and there's some daily ritual going on in front of that corner of the house. Or Buddhist altar, where you make daily offerings and food and water and incense and think and pray for the well-being of the deceased relatives. So it has a couple of objects within it, not only the sort of the top, the digital voice assistant bit, so it has a kind of wipe underneath so that you can always wipe this crystal for the shininess it affects, perhaps the quality of the conversation, or you have a hand sanitizer in the middle, it's before COVID, and I think it was an interesting thing. And then there's this sort of mystically gleaming crystal on top, and you place your hands over it, and the crystal retrieves local real-time weather forecast data and pronounces the forecast as if it's some sort of oracle, like, when you shine, the sun will appear and light your way. So it's kind of, I told you, don't be so harsh on this in terms of technical side of things, but this was the sort of, we had a list of weather forecasts and list of kind of poems that we created. It was all handmade, it's not AI generated or something. If we recreate in 2024, it could be interesting. But anyway, the aim is to give a sense of ownership and responsibility for voice assistance prediction to the user. So if you hear this, when you shine, the sun will appear and light your way. It doesn't matter if it actually the sun shines or not. It's you that makes sunshine, if that makes sense, you know. And if it becomes cloudy, maybe you might be questioning, am I actually shining or not? Am I shining enough? You know, that's a sort of, you know, the shift in the sort of tone is the one that I wanted to aim here. So here, I think, looking back, it's also about using voice as a medium to make data more personal and perhaps more relatable. And hopefully through this kind of experiments, we may be able to create a more richer interaction with this new inhabitant for home today. The next one is about energy, and somehow it's also about proverbs. It's a hard kind of infrastructure thing, but please keep up with me. So this was done in 2021, and we were super interested in energy systems, and we were looking into why energy systems are looking like what they look like today. And we found this interesting research from this architecture critic called Elisava. And she says that the shift from the agricultural society to an industrial society was mainly driven by fossil fuels. And that gave rise to factory towns and global trade networks and suburbs and megacities, things that we are used to now. She calls it carbon modernity, because fossil fuels can be extracted somewhere far and also sometime long time ago and transported and sorted. And only when we want to use energy, they are burnt. And also the amount they are burnt, as much as we want, right? It's so versatile and mobile and portable, etc., etc. You can also say that the distance between the point of extraction and the point of consumption are greater apart, both in terms of time and space. So that facilitates things like power plants being built in suburbs and farther afield, again, things being pushed away from our living surface kind of situation. And then highways connecting these dots. We choose to deliberately hide our energy infrastructure. Gas pipes and electricity cable as well are hidden behind the walls. Most of us probably never see or understand how energy flows throughout our city. To be honest, I didn't even know until I worked on this project. A couple of years earlier, I switched to renewable energy supply company. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I can use energy freely. It's all renewable. But it's obviously not. I only clicked a couple of things and then made a payment. And it shouldn't be, right? Energy mix is all much more complex than, bulb or octopus supplying my home. It's never going to be the case. It's all mixed up. So I am still using fossil fuel. Well, I'm not so familiar with the energy mix in this country, but at least that's the case in the UK. So most of us never know or understand how energy works or flows. And that somehow makes energy, like I used to think, make energy feel anonymous. We don't know where it's from. And also that makes it feel like it's somehow of an infinite supply. Like you open a tap and then it just comes out. You can use as much as you want. And also that's probably why we tend to make something like this. It's a house-looking object in Toronto, Canada, but it's an electricity substation. I think we really don't like to see energy systems there. It's fascinating thing that we do. We go that far to make infrastructure invisible and anonymous. But is that going to be the case going forward? I don't know, because we are definitely moving into the paradigm of renewable energy, which is mainly driven by weather events or other, but still real-time natural phenomena, which probably have higher degree of fluctuation. Of course, there is a solution to store electricity in a battery, but you can argue that the distance between the point of energy extraction and the point of energy consumption can be much shorter. So imagine you look outside the window, wind is blowing more than maybe an hour ago. That affects what you can afford to do in the home. That kind of future is not unconceivable. If that's the case, maybe climate and energy becomes much more intertwined. We probably need a new language for energy, if that's the case, because we've done a bunch of stuff like a UI, UX design, data visualization. It has come so far and it has done so well so far, but it still has a long way to go. It's still complex. No one gets delighted when an electricity bill comes into the post. On the other hand, weather has spoken a convivial language. Proverbs, weather proverbs, are shared among community members, memorable, and they're enjoyable. This is one of the most famous weather proverbs in the UK. Red sky at night, red sky at night, shepherd's delight. Red sky in the morning, shepherd's warning. A red sky at sunset usually indicates good weather the following day. On the other hand, a red sky at sunrise can be an indication of bad weather to come. So we decided to collect these. We decided to generate lots of proverbs for energy systems. That's what the project was going to be about. So we started collecting data about power sources, power plants, energy generating facilities, mapped out all of them in the Isle of UK, well, British Isles. The blue circles are fossil fuel power plants. They're much more concentrated. Each of them is bigger, representing a bigger power generation capacity. They're also concentrated in the areas where population is less dense. So we've kind of further pushed those blue circles away. Whereas yellow circles, the renewables, are much more distributed, fragmented, smaller, which means, especially solar panels are, owned privately, and homeowners can install them. Less so in wind, but still similar situation. Then we created energy regions on the map, based on the previous map. So just like we have weather regions in weather forecast. But unlike weather forecast, energy regions are sort of overlapping with one another, showing the energy mix. So some fossil fuel region can be created, but at the same time, some of the energy mix can be supplied by renewable energy. So that's why it's kind of overlapping and complex and layered, which I find extremely interesting. Sort of this complex nature of energy provenance is something that we wanted to explore. Then we could forecast by looking at the data coming out of the power generators, we can predict and forecast the energy generation trend of each of the areas. And during the process, we found this book from 1898. It's a collection of weather proverbs in the British Isles. It was an effort made for the war purpose, but somehow they thought, what people talk about weather, how people speak about weather was somehow important in gaining information and intelligence. And that's extremely fascinating because, it's all linked to the development of satellite and control of the air and stuff like that. But anyway, that's a kind of perhaps another story to be told. But in this project, we purely use this as a sort of training data for GAN, if anyone remembers. I think it was Generative Adversarial Network. It was in 2021. So we fed 1,500 proverbs into the network and to produce new proverbs informed by the combination of the region's power source and relevant weather forecast. So, for example, if a region's energy source is mainly solar, and the weather forecast of that region tells oncoming clouds and rain, then we generated something like this. If night 3 dewless there be, 'twill rain you're sure to see. With skies dark and nearly black, power declines, energy will come back. If the energy source is wind, and the weather forecast tells weakening wind speeds, the sharper the blast, the sooner it is past. As wind shifts full to slim, power recedes, devices dim. And there's a common theme of poem going on here, and then also we can see the development of technology in this project, which is kind of nice. Right, so we collected these energy proverbs and put together into a website called energyproverb.net. And this is a kind of screen recording plus a little bit of that website.
Halifax region, type wind. 25 total generators with a maximum capacity of 115 megawatts. Wind, 6 knots north-northeast, increasing later. Winds that change against the sun are always sure to backward run. Turbines that sing their buzzing song yields us power all day long. Principal region, type solar. 71 total generators with a maximum capacity of 386 megawatts. UV index of 7 steady. With dew before midnight, the next day will sure be bright. Photons fall, panels aglow, to the town, energy will flow.
And it goes on and on like this for all of the regions. And this was exhibited at the Solar Biennale in Rotterdam in 2022. So you can say this, it's a sort of using AI to create a sort of cultural language for energy, which has been sort of anonymous and hidden. The last project I'm going to talk about is the most recent one I worked on at Normally. The client was NHS. If you are not familiar with the sort of the crisis situation that UK is in, the NHS is a national health service in the UK. And they have been experiencing a series of funding cuts for the last decades or more, and their staff experience significant kind of stress and strain. Their wages often don't keep up with the increasing cost of living, and widespread frustration is there with multiple strikes, etc., etc. They need to cope with long hours, understaffing, and high patient demand and expectation. It's so high stress, and they experience frequent burnout. And we didn't directly work with doctors and nurses. The brief came from the user-centered design group. But the pressure to be as efficient as possible is common in our counterpart as well. So the brief was to create a process and tool for finding, accessing, and sharing user research knowledge across teams at scale. So their challenge is that the insights coming out of design research, user research projects are fragmented and buried and extremely difficult to rediscover at a later stage by people who are not necessarily involved in that project. So they couldn't find what people have done in the past. I want to know about things like what happened in the usability test of this new online service that NHS has released, but we don't know. Maybe even it's easier to start a new research project for that than finding the right information to that level, even though they're pressured to be efficient as possible. That pushes them into even thinking like that, which is kind of shocking. We talked to like a dozen of researchers or more, and a lot of kind of challenges that they were talked about. I think you can relate if you have any experience in working in large organizations. Lack of overview and snapshot across teams, missing the context and summary. If you luckily find the document, it's just too long. We don't have time for reading all of them. The existing toolkit is it's kind of prohibiting. The access and permission issues, organizations are completely siloed, even though the research project insights should be, in principle, widely shared. It's organizationally impossible to share. And you don't have to be in the healthcare industry with such a high demand and pressure to know that creating a knowledge base that is effective and sustainable and inclusive is extremely hard. In the previous company, I used to manage our company's Notion pages. I was the Notion master, and then later became Notion police. And monitoring my perfect database structure, this member somehow accidentally changing the property color, and or adding new tag and stuff, or like some entries are somehow disappearing overnight and stuff like that, and going there and then fixing stuff like that. I used to do that every now and then. That's really hard. Even though I'm pretty sure I'm good at talking data, human speaking data, I'm sort of better at it, but someone like librarian needs to be there, almost constantly. That was like 40 people studio, and I can't imagine what it's going to be like to be handling research projects, insights, if there are like hundreds of researchers fragmented in different teams. So you need a librarian figure who manages all the data, and that's not something that we could afford in this project. So regardless of the sector you're in, I think typically if you want to create a knowledge base, you probably have a creator who, in this case, user researchers who share their research project insights into this database, and then manager, like the Notion police, me, or librarian, who ensures the quality of the database, and then consumer who browse the result or the database contents. But maybe with the power of large language models, we can do something like this. So creators only need to upload the final presentation document, and then large language model analyze what's in there, and then extract information into configured properties, and then summarize each field using a common language, not using the sort of jargon used within the team members that no one else could understand. And then consumer side could just extract, again, as a kind of bit of summary that they want to read. If we could build this, maybe what used to be manager or librarian or Notion police don't have to exist anymore. Then maybe they focus on the curation of the content instead of ensuring the quality of the content instead of the quality of the database. That could be really interesting. So we started prototyping some of the experiences, and creator side on the left and consumer side on the right. And after a bunch of iterations, again, user interviews, co-creation sessions, all the standard stuff. And then, but we ended up creating a system like this, where you still have a point of curation, where human in the loop can have an influence over, and also, again, even though this is a user research insights, it's not like medical critical stuff, but it's a it's National Health Service, and as an organization, there has been a huge kind of fear of AI. What if this is going to be used in A and B and C? So we really wanted to make sure that this isn't the case of AI hallucinating contents that are not there in the original research documents and stuff like that. So we had a point of curation there deliberately, and to mitigate that risk as well. And then, so this is the final design. That's the creator side UI, and then you just upload, and then magically disappears. And then you just say, okay, yeah, this is it. You can edit if you want. And the consumer side kind of looks like this. Well, this is a sort of concept illustration, but you get the idea. Now, what's interesting is that you can kind of overlay context on top of one another. So you can imagine a situation where text box expands as you type in, I want to know about children's mental health situation, or I want to add about maybe post-COVID situation, what are the parent situations. You can kind of add those contexts in, and LLMs can understand it because it's contextual, and technically it's kind of vector database, and you don't have to type in specific tags and stuff. You can talk human to the database. That was the idea. And it still doesn't look like, one of those AI chatbots. It kind of looks like, in a way, traditional Googling, but behind the hood, under the hood, we are borrowing the power of large language models. So that's now being piloted in the organization. And I think this is a really good example of using AI to free humans, like me, Notion police, from having to speak data to allowing them to speak human in their effort. I don't have any conclusion, so I put it like closing notes. So I'm still kind of exploring. I have lots of questions in there as well. So many of the things we design can now talk to us, talk to the audience, with a much, much more granularly personalized and human-like language. But should they do that? I'm not sure. In what mode? Should it always be language? I don't know. Is it visual? I don't know. In what language? Again, this English first, or there are other kind of multi-language models as well, but at what cost? Again, we didn't touch anything about the environmental or human labor cost of this running these systems. For whose benefit? And I think understanding the context that our design operates in is still important, and more and more important for designers to be responsible for, and it's still definitely on us, not on some sort of, AI is not going to be able to understand the context. We saw loads of examples, of inappropriate AIs and inappropriate machine-generated contents. I don't have to point a finger at anything. I think we all know that. And I'm going to finish this presentation with this quote from digital activist and designer Aral Balkan. He co-wrote an ethical design manifesto. And I think he wrote a lot of things, but what's in the middle highlighted is one I want to read here, because we are talking about sort of not the sort of infrastructure level practice, or not the sort of superficial user interface design level, but we are talking about sort of ideas and the design brief level. So he said, technology that respects human effort is functional, convenient, and reliable. It is thoughtful and accommodating, not arrogant or demanding. It understands that you might be distracted or differently abled. It respects the limited time you have on this planet. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we have 5 minutes, 10, 5 to 20 minutes for questions. So there is a microphone over there. Podeu parlar en català, en castellà, podem traduir aquí una pregunta. Aquí.
Okay. Hi, I'm here. Hi.
Yes.
So thank you very much for the talk and for taking us through this data exploration process. So you started off with a snapshot of Strava and how they're better like athlete intelligent better version. And you kind of highlighted how it's important, how they're trying to introduce humanness into that, let's say, better version, but without maybe you really like making use of the data. And then you started off your presentation and enhancing that we need to use, develop, let's say, AI into a more human approach. And then you showed us a project like Energy for Proverbs. Could you like maybe just highlight a little bit more how that project of Energy Proverb versus the Strava snapshot is different in terms of humanness?
I think it's all about the context of use that it's in. So there's no problem in transforming numerical data of an exercise activity into a poem, into a paragraph of text. There's no inherent problem in there, well, except for the energy cost of generating and stuff like that. But they're completely misreading the context of use. They are athletes, their users are athletes, they're extremely data literate, and then they can read data extremely quickly. They don't have time to read paragraphs of text about the activities that you have. These are the things that they have already internalized in their bodies. So it's completely sort of not really, it doesn't really provide any added value to the experience. I might be wrong. There might be some group of users who are extremely benefiting from it. I don't know, but that's the sort of reaction that I had when I saw those screenshots. And then Energy Proverb is, again, same, I think, process-wise, transforming a bunch of numerical data into a poem, a written format. But the context is, of course, that project was self-initiated, so you can set as context, you can set any context that we liked. So the context was that, we are experiencing changing weather patterns. We need to talk about these changing weather patterns. Also, that's going to affect our home energy use and stuff like that. We need to be able to talk about this in a way that's communal, in a way that's regional, in a way that's kind of convivial. That was the context that we set in that project. So it's a bit of a maybe cheaty answer to your question, but hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess it's the subtle insight that makes the difference, right? Yeah, thank you very much.
So.
Yeah.
Thanks for your work. I have a neighbor that screams to Alexa, no? And it made me think that my relationship with all these agents inside the house. And after that, I switch all my devices to avoid the illusion of me talking to a human, and kept on with this idea of Star Trek. No, when they talk to the computer, it's simply computer, and the conscience that you're talking to a computer. So when you showed this example of this correction they made about the side effect of kids changing their behavior towards humans, I think it's precisely the contrary example of our usual relationship with this kind of technology. I mean, we start a conversation and we suppose or imagine that there is intelligence the other way, the other side.
Yeah.
But that's not. That's the base of our frustration, no? Because we are not getting the answers from an intelligence, but from the hazard of the LLM finding words that might provide meaning to us, no? So I think that perhaps is keeping on expecting something that is not there.
Yeah.
Is a mistake we as a society fall into, no?
Yeah.
Or could be, no, but in my
I don't, well, probably I don't have an answer for that, but that reminded me of another example of Amazon tweaking Alexa. So I think there was a time when text-to-speech technology was far more developed than speech recognition. So Alexa's speech felt much more natural than they can understand human speech. Does that make sense? So as a result of it, users of Amazon Alexa thought because she sounds so natural, she could understand this thing, that thing, but she doesn't respond because she doesn't understand. Her listening ability was a lot far inferior than her speech ability. So they ended up degrading the speech-to-text technology into something a little bit more robotic to match the ability of her understanding. Now, I thought that was extremely fascinating. It talks about the expectation that we have, we imagine intelligence through a very limited amount of information.
But if I may add a corollary, is the thing that having those devices right now is simply a tool for these companies to gather our information or more access to us.
Yeah.
And we're giving away so much and getting so little. I mean, we're just entertained, but we're getting so little from that technology that I think all these notions that are behind you kind of are unthinkable in this scenario. No?
What's unthinkable in this scenario?
For instance, expect human rights, decentralized, peer-to-peer.
I see what you mean. Yeah, okay. So this was a kind of activist manifesto, and then I think the way we should read it is that technology that respects human rights comes up as a foundation, and then what's built on top is technologies that respects human effort, and then what's built on top is the technology that respects human experience. So it has its, whether or not we can all agree, it has sort of decentralized, peer-to-peer, zero knowledge, all these kind of infrastructural properties as the foundation, and then we can build technology that respects human effort. That's probably how I should have introduced. You might have misled, but it's completely true. I think it's interesting, the biggest usage of Amazon Alexa and all these voice assistants now is It's just about turning music volume down and up, and like switching light on and off. And are we really? So it's kind of interesting. And then that same kind of AI might take a same trajectory. It might still be used in various places, but it can be everywhere, but in such a mundane places. We don't know. But we should be ready for that scenario too, I think.
Hi. Thank you for your talk. You talked about Notion, and as you might have seen, they have their own AI, and they've improved it recently. I was curious if you had any opinion on, like, if you think they achieved their goal, which is pretty similar to the one you had with the NHS system, and if you think, yeah, they succeeded at that, and just what are your thoughts on it?
Sorry, I couldn't really hear you very well. Could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure. About the Notion AI system, because you talked about Notion, and they've improved.
Oh, Notion AI.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they've improved it recently, and I was wondering if you had any opinion on that, and if you think they're succeeded at their goals, or.
Yeah, I think that's probably the sort of way that all of these companies are going towards, and. I'm a huge Notion fan, so I can't talk anything bad about Notion. But it's on a really practical level, I did experience a lot of these things that I talked about in the NHS project. Where we have all the information there, but no one's finding it right, even though I have created this perfect database, that kind of situation. If Notion AI can solve that situation, the productivity, efficiency gain is going to be great. If, again, it's I think your point is kind of similar, but at what cost, right? What kind of information are we giving? Environmental costs, et cetera, et cetera. We need to know more about those properties before being able to make a sound decision, I think. But in principle, it could be extremely powerful.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk just over here. I was wondering, what advice would you give to designers who are trying to learn how to think about data in new and creative ways?
Oh, that's really hard. I think, I think I'm coming from computer science background, so I probably naturally able to talk kind of, what people typically imagine data looks like, But I think designers, I talked about user research, and those insights are data points. They're just expressed differently, empirically felt or subjectively observed, but they're data points. And maybe trying to verbalize every kind of single inspiration that informed your design decision, and then noting down how they're connected, what informed what decision, what worked and what didn't. I think that it's probably an interesting exercise for designers with zero data literacy to maybe start thinking computationally. You don't have to learn coding. It's more, I don't know. I don't know. yeah, computational, how to teach computational. I think someone like you probably know much better than I do. I think. I don't know, did it answer some question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the speech. So one of the previous questions or like conversation was about the AI and like how much we give as a humans to AI in terms of data. And then you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that your child is now using the iPad for like, you said something like creativity never been so clean. So I'm thinking like if we giving so much and then with all this AI, creativity is so like shaped and limited. How do you see how do you see like the technology affecting the creativity in the future? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does.
From your like personal experience or like even since you're interaction designer, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
how does it? Well, we're not using like you said also like when there was no user interface, some people say it was easier and maybe more straightforward.
Yeah,
but somehow.
I mean, in working in a sort of agency role in an industry, I have seen many instances of people bringing in, mood board full of AI-generated images, and I mean, I've used a lot of AI-powered translator, Japanese English translations since like more than 10 years ago, with little regards to consequences. Or like coders have been using IntelliSense or VS Code plugin to fill auto, suggestion of coding, programming, and stuff like that. It's really hard. I think it's really case by case. Again, I think it comes down to at what cost and how much benefit are you getting and who's benefiting. And in the context of design education, I've recently taught in a university a couple of weeks ago, and as one of the students I looked after brought in mood board generated with AI. And I was a bit, we didn't have much time to discuss this. It wasn't the place to discuss that topic either. But I was really kind of confused by it because finding the right image is what has been part of the practice. That probably, it's really hard to tell. I'm obviously biased, so I tend to look at what I have used to be having to do as something that was essential in building who I am now. But maybe not, I don't know. And maybe building a mood board from scratch from crappy internet images was completely wasteful, and it's easier to build using AI. If it's, cheaper in every sense, makes sense. Does it prevent people from, to prevent the opportunity from people? I don't know. It's really hard. I mean, there will be I don't really know the answer. I think, but obviously the AI generation tools are oversold at the moment. At least the price is artificially low at the moment, and then they might be able to get away with it, and that might be the price that's going to be continuing forever. I'm not so sure about it. It might become suddenly more expensive, as they will probably find it more and more difficult to train new models and et cetera. So it probably comes down to the discussion of cost and benefit and the learning opportunity, things like that. But I think being able to identify a project, an opportunity, and situating in a context for the people, for the audience of that object, whatever digital or physical. I think that's such a fundamental aspect of designing, and I don't see that part going away anytime soon. But I think that with a hope, I think.
Yeah, I came across a couple of like design agencies that they only generate images from AI, and it's like I just wonder how, like how limited it is in terms of like design, like how many ideas the AI can create, and also how many people might lose jobs, and also like there is lack of human touch into it, right?
Also, they're putting themselves at risk as well. I mean, if, I can totally imagine prompt engineering becomes a thing of the past. And it's like a lot of AI startups go completely bust as soon as OpenAI releases new feature. And then they're putting themselves into that kind of risk as well. And I think, it's completely up to them. That's probably not the pathway I'd recommend going if you're learning design or coding.
Thank you.
Oh. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, great. What do I do?